Hello, Bella. Hello, Sarah. I missed the two of you in person. Just a little bit of a crazy morning. And hello, Becky. Shalom, Hindi, and Rosalind. And oh, I love that. Baruch Hashem. Who's Baruch Hashem?
Bella.
בלה אריסון, אבל זה מהטלפון, תכף אני יוצאת מהטלפון.
איזה יופי, והשיעור מוקדש לעילוי נשמתן של מליה בת רב זאב הלוי, אסתר לאה בת רב מאיר דוד, רב יצחק צבי בן משה הכהן. So in their zchut, we're going to continue learning. And this week it works out perfectly for Parshat Mishpatim. I'm already going to apologize that because this morning, as I said, is a little crazy. I have back-to-back shiurim, and people think that because on Zoom, it makes it a little easier. But when some are in person and some are in Zoom, it actually makes it a little more difficult. So again, hopefully we will have shiur till about 10:35 this morning. Till about 9:30.
Ken, that's the problem with Zoom.
Right there.
What happened?
She disappeared. Her internet probably fell.
Oh, I was wondering what happened. Thought it was me.
No.
In the middle of discussing whether you can make a tanur on Chol Moed, you can't make a tanur on Chol Moed. And I said, all of a sudden, what happened? Oh. All right, let's go to the Gemara. Just gonna make myself something to eat. Gemara.
כן, זה בעיה באינטרנט, היא מתחברת שוב. לא כיף. שרה, השיעור של נאוה מלכיאל היה פשוט מדהים.
אני מאוד הסתרתי אחרי השיעור הזה, שתדעי לך.
את מה?
Okay, sorry about that.
הסתרתי.
הזהרת?
כן, we'll talk another time. טוב, לא קיבלנו מקורות, שני.
אז הם אותם מקורות של לפני שבוע, אז אני שוב.
לפני שבועיים, שבוע לא ישבנו.
נכון, תודה. זאת אומרת, it's called תפילה משפטים. So I'll post here also.
No, we didn't get תפילה משפטים.
What kind of תפילה משפטים?
The last one we got was from Matan Torah to the Siddur.
Yeah, we didn't get to משפטים.
From Matan Torah to the Siddur.
Those are the last Mekorot we have.
Because we didn't have a shiur last week, Shani.
Nachon. So let me see. Maybe that's what I called it. Yeah, that's what I called it. Nachon. From Matan Torah to the Siddur. On my file, it appears as Mishpatim. Nachon. Okay, so this is what we're going to take a look at because we didn't fully explore. And this week, it obviously is even more appropriate. So everyone has the ones from 2 weeks ago? Or, okay, let me share it here as well. One moment. You know what? I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
I'll put it in the chat as a PDF. Here we go. Okay, plus I'll post them. Okay, this way you should get it. Here we go. Okay. It's ending, and if I could share the screen, בלה, את יודעת אם זה דרכך או זה דרך המשרד?
דרך המשרד, אני אשלח לה עכשיו הודעה, רגע.
סליחה, תודה.
She's there. לבריאות.
תודה.
She hears us.
Okay. Even though if everyone downloads, and I guess I don't. Still disabled. Okay, I'm going to get started. I hope that's okay, even if you're not all saying it, but you are, right? Okay, let's try this one more time. Okay, so I'm going to bring it up. Okay, so if you remember, we saw the different opinions with regard to how do we understand where tefillah is going to be based oraita, if especially we saw the famous braita between Rabbi Yosef ben Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi with regard to tefillah keneged avot, tefillah keneged karbanot, and we saw that technically the avot obviously already davened in some way, shape, and form that we have been discussing for the past few months. But really, again, the asmachta in the sense of basing it on some psukim, that comes from the Torah. And therefore, what we saw, definitely according to the Rambam, is that tefillah is deoraita. According to the Ramban, he agrees that there is tefillah that's deoraita, but that's only going to be be'itzara. Whereas the Rambam, certainly based on also this midrash halacha or the braita of tefillah being based on the karbanot, will say, what do you mean? Again, these are laws based on the karbanot, which is why we turned to Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph in the Rambam in Hilchot Tefillah, wherein he paskined mitzvat aseh litpalel b'chol yom, albeit it's true that we don't know any minimal number of tefillot per day. We don't know, again, the nusach of tefillah. Nonetheless, again, what was the basics? The basis, this week's parsha, v'avadatem et Hashem Elokechem. So even though we saw the various midrashim that are based on ula avdo b'chol avavchem and Sefer Dvarim, nonetheless, the Rambam says it's actually based on Parsha Mishpatim. And therefore, again, if our basic worship is going to be to worship Hashem through tefillah, then initially this meant a spontaneous tefillah of Shevach, Bakasha, and Hodaya that everyone would be reciting basically every day, again, at some point during the day, again, to as the Rambam says, in your own words, be able to speak Shevach, Bakasha, and Hodaya. However, we also saw, according to the Rambam, that what happened over time was that people no longer felt fluent in their language, again, in the Hebrew language, and because there really is a nature of tefillah in Lashon HaKodesh, so that's when Anshe Knesset Hagdolah began to compose what we know as the tefillah. The Rambam in Sefer Mitzvot actually says it's not just, again, going to be, as we saw once again, ulavdo b'chol avavchem, but again he says, v'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem. It's based on Parshat Mishpatim, Parachav Gimel, v'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem. So now we're ready to take a look and see the context of these psukim that the Rambam is talking about. So here we have a quick, I'm going to say, introduction or summary of this week's Parsha, where we find that Parshat Mishpatim begins with Moshe Rabbeinu, or I should say Parshat Yitro ends with Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Har Sinai after Am Yisrael are so scared. They said, we can no longer tolerate this revelation of God. Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to serve as our intermediary. Sure enough, Moshe goes up and he's told already, these are the Mishpatim, the Torah, the Mitzvah, that he's going to then relate to Am Yisrael. And we have, interestingly, what does this, what we're going to see, the Sefer HaBrit, according to the Ramban, what does it actually consist of? It consists then of laws such as Eved Ivri, Ama Ivriya, laws of Benatam L'Chavero, the laws of Nezikin, Niskei Mamon, again, all different property laws and damages, followed by many mitzvot Ben Adam L'Makom, including the Shalosh Regalim, including the mitzvah of Shemitah and Shabbat. Again, that's basically what we see is more or less, one can even argue, an elaboration on the mitzvot Ben Adam L'Makom, Ben Adam L'Chavero that we saw in Parshat Yitro. Afterwards, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to present the Sefer HaBrit to Bnei Yisrael, and they're going to have what's called the Brit HaGanot, blood that's going to be sprinkled on Am Yisrael, on a Mizbeach, representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is where they officially say, Naaseh v'nishma. Now, the ends of this, of all the laws, ends, interestingly, with a promise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we're in Shmo Parachav Gimel, Hinei Anochi sholeach malach lefanecha, lishmarcha baderach, before the actual Brit, again, Hashem says, if you observe all these mitzvot of this Brit, I am sending an angel before you, which according to most Parshanim is not necessarily a celestial angel. Some say it is. According to most, it's Moshe, meaning now I'm sending Moshe before you to go and to bring you to Eretz Yisrael. Hishamer mipanav ushma b'kolo. So make sure to pay attention to him. Listen to what he says. Al tamerbo ki lo yisal pishachem kishmi b'kerbo. And he's not going to pardon your offenses, meaning Moshe is my messenger. So he's going to be the one who will also exact punishments. Ki im shama tishma b'kolo v'asita et kol asher daber v'ayavti et oivecha v'tzarti et torecha. Keep in mind that now Am Yisrael, we find out from Sefer Devarim, are albeit but 11 days away from Eretz Yisrael. The point is then to listen to everything that Hashem has to say. And if you listen to Moshe Rabbeinu, then I will make sure to get rid of all your enemies as you're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. Because when my angel, namely Moshe Rabbeinu, goes before you, he's going to bring you to this land, and I will annihilate all the different nations. Now, when you get to the land, I don't want you worshiping them. And even worse, don't follow their practices. In order to ensure that you're not going to adopt their practices, make sure to get rid of any vestiges of idolatry. Here comes our pasuk. And said, I want you to exclusively worship Hashem, and Hashem will bless you, not only getting rid of the other nations, he'll bless you agriculturally, your bread, your water, remove sickness from your midst, which is basically an idea that also came up, if you remember, in Parshat Beshalach. And last week's Parsha, where we basically heard, based on Kisham Sam Lochok Mushpat Bisham Nisahu. So a similar idea with regard to Hashem assuring annihilation of our enemies and provision of agricultural bounty and removing sickness from our midst if we keep the mitzvot. Now, if you look at this, one can argue, seems to be in contrast to the way that we worship Avodah Zarah. Hashem says, don't worship Avodah Zarah, basically worship me. Why does the Rambam incorporate this as a basis for tefillah? So we're going to continue and recognize that the Rambam is looking at this in context. That's why it's imperative that we learn it actually this week, right after Shmo Parachaf, right after Aseret HaDibrot. If you remember, what did Hashem say there? The very, very end of Parshat Yitro was Atem Ri'item Kimin Hashemayim Dibarti Machem Lo Tasuniti Elohei Chasav Elohei Zahav Lo Tasun Lachem Mizbeach Adama Taseli V'Zabachta Lam Et Olotacha Bet Shlomecha Tzoncha Bet Bekaracha B'chol HaMakom Asher Atzger Shmi Abo Elach U'Verachticha V'Mizbach HaManim Taseli Lo Tivne Eten Gazit. Hashem says, and how do I want you to worship me? Not with the fanfare that you just saw at the Sound and Light show of Mamad Har Sinai. I want a mizbeach adama, no metals involved. And part of it is also clearly Mizbeach worship, right? And don't worship on the Mizbeach with your erva being revealed, which is why there aren't going to be stairs. There's going to be a kebesh. Also why there are mechnasayim that are worn by the Kohanim. Then we have, as discussed, these mishpatim. גם בחורות, איזה יופי, תודה. איזה יופי. אז ככה כולנו נוכל לראות את זה ביחד. בלה, תודה רבה. So take a look at this. Now we can see this inside. Yana Parachaf Aleph, right? This is where we have, what do you know? This week's Parsha. Ve'ela HaMishpatim, right? Now notice the focus. Eved Ivri, Ama Ivriya, right? Makeh Isha Vamet Mot Yumat Asher Lo Tada Velo Kemina Liado. Again, someone who is Rotzeach Mezid, someone who kidnaps, someone who curses his parents, someone who causes now all different types of nizikin, both to an Eved and to a pregnant woman. And now what happens during those cases? Ayin tachat ayin, shein tachat shein. This is what we call niske mamon, the laws of damages. Ki ha'keish et ein abdo, et ein amato b'shichata, lachavshi yeshachana. And all of these are cases clearly of ben adam l'chavero. Right? Everyone sees that? Very clear ben adam l'chavero that we're talking about, not only with regard to the person themselves, but then we have a new parshiya, ki gachshor. Again, this is Baba Kama for you. Ki kachshor et ish o et isha umet sakol yisakel hashor lo yachel et besarom. We have all different types of laws of damages, even to one's property. So still, ben adam, clearly ben adam l'chaviro. right? I have to respect not only my friend, but everything that belongs to someone else in my midst. Then we have, again, continuation of niskei mamon. What happens if there's a ganav? Again, when, excuse me, when are you allowed to kill? When are you not allowed to kill? When do you pay? When do you not pay? Again, when the geneva, when the stolen object is found, he has to pay a knas, he has to pay double the fine. Again, the laws caused by my animals even to property. How about the laws caused by inanimate objects even? Kelim. What happens during all these cases? So again, here we find what we call niskei mamon, through basically the end of what we're going to take a look at now is, as we said, Perek Chaf Gimel, and where this comes up then in Perek Chaf Gimel. So let's take a look at the entire Parshiya. Again, notice we have Lo Tisat Shmi Lashav. Wait a second. Al Tashit Yadcha Im Rasha. So again, this seems to be, I don't know, Ben Adam L'Chabero. Then we have Lo Tisat, but this is Shema Shav. Mosa, again, a Chazal extrapolate from here. We're still talking about Ben Adam L'Chabero. Must be used in making a Shvua in a case of Ben Adam L'Chabero. For example, one swears in the name of God, one swears in the name of God that one didn't actually steal an object. So that would be one example. Another, Lo tia charei rabim l'raot, Lo taneh al rav l'ntot charei rabim l'hatot. Also, the Parshanim explain these are talking about within the context of criminal law, within the context of Beit Din, right? So these are more Ben Adam L'Chaberos. Then we go back to property damages, but not in the same way, right? These are Hashabat Aveda, Ki Terachamor Somnecha, again, Azot Tazovimo, helping one another out, not accepting any bribes, Ger Lo Tochatz, not oppressing the Ger Tzedek, the Ger Tukshav. Then we have Shishanim Tizrat Tartzacha. Now look at this carefully. This is the first time that we have the laws of Shemitah. 6 years, you're going to plant. V'asam tetzvota, v'ashviyit tishmetenu unitashta, v'achlu evyonei amecha b'yitram tochal chayat hasadeh, kein ta'aseh l'karmecha lezetecha. If I would ask you, based on Parshat Mishpatim, what is the goal of mitzvah of Shemitah? What would you all say?
לעניים, זה מה שכתוב.
לעני, מצוין, exactly. It's a social nature, right? Don't confuse it with what we know in Sefer Vayikra, Parsha Pahar, which is Shabbat Haaretz LaHashem, which is more about Ben Adam L'Makom, recognizing that Hashem owns the land. In Parsha Mishpatim, the first time that Shemitah is mentioned, it's actually a sabbatical year in order to benefit all the different indigent members of society. It's a social law. Similarly, again, take a look at Pasuk Yudbet. Sheshet yamim taseh masacha, uv'yam hashvi'i tishbot leman yanuach shocha v'chamorecha v'yinafesh ben amatecha b'hager. So too Shabbat, right? If I would ask you, what's the point of Shabbat based on Parshat Mishpatim, what would you all say?
Socially.
Excellent. It's a social reason, right? So much so that whenever, I have a Shabbaton and I don't put in Menuchat Shabbat time, I get a little bit of musar from people. Shani, how about the Shabbat Parshat Mishpatim? You have to make sure that other people rest, even if you're not going to rest, right? That's Shabbat of Mishpatim. It's social. Sheshet yamim taseh masacha v'yam hashvi'i tishbot leman yanuach uv'chol asher amarti alechem tishameru b'shem Elohim achirim lo taskiru lo yishama al picha. Now we hear, don't mention other gods' names. Shalosh regalim tachol gali b'shana. Now it seems that clearly the shalosh regalim are ben adam lamakom v'lo yiru panai rekam chakakatzir b'korei masacha, to recognize that Hashem is the one who provides us for the agriculture. Shalosh pamim b'shana yira'eh kol zacharcha et el pnei ha'adon Hashem. I would say clearly ben adam lamakom. Similarly, lo tizbach al chametz tam zivchi lo yalin chelav chagiat boker rishi b'koreat matcha tavi beit Hashem elokecha lo tvashel gdi b'chelav imo. Also ben adam lamakom. Don't worship the way that the other nations worship. And this
אבל שני, אולי אפשר דווקא ללמוד הפוך, שבגלל עכשיו דיברנו על שמיטה ושבת במקום חברתי, כאילו, that maybe also we could learn hafuch, that the shalosh regalim, the whole point of it is being together, all of Am Yisrael together, and not I don't know, I'm asking.
Yafe, meaning that maybe there is a social component there as well. Okay, now I would argue even, meaning what is the Torah basically saying? Even what Bella's mentioning, even the Ben Adam Lamakom components, by juxtaposing them, nachon the smichut, by placing them next to the Ben Adam Lechavero, basically Hashem is saying how, and this is what we're going to see right now. When you go up 3 times a year, it's clear that you don't forget about everything that I just mentioned, meaning there is a social component even when you're involved in Ben Adam Lamakom. Beautiful, beautiful, Bella, because that is the segue. Again, to go back, again, we just saw Lo Tavashal Gedi B'Chalevimo, and now the continuation is actually the way that we started. Yes.
I just want to, I don't understand. Like, are the tefillot that we're being taught here, is that, sorry, that it's only for Eretz Yisrael? Or is it like, it sounds like this is all preparation for stuff inside. Because you're talking about Shemitah, you're talking about you're preparing. Remember Hashem, you're going, I'm going to save you to go into Eretz Yisrael. Like, don't, like, it just sounds like it's more conducive for here.
Is that meaning? I would definitely, Hindi, I'm so happy you said this because I wasn't going to. So now is an opportunity to say this. Where clearly the Sefer Habrit, 100%, all the mitzvot here, and are meant ideally. This is the basis for the Ramban to say, can you fulfill some of these mitzvot even outside of Eretz Yisrael? Hashabat Abeda, can you fulfill outside of Eretz Yisrael? Can you fulfill Niskei Mamon? Do the laws of damages apply even outside of Eretz Yisrael? Of course. Right? However, the Shabbat apply outside of Eretz Yisrael? Definitely. By juxtaposing Shemitah, and for that matter, again, the laws of Aliyah LaRegel, amidst the rest of these laws, so let's put the social idea aside, you definitely see that the ideal is we're preparing, meaning the Torah is preparing, Hashem's preparing Am Yisrael to enter Eretz Yisrael, right? This Sefer Habrit is meant to be fulfilled in Eretz Yisrael, 100%. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't fulfill the ones that you can fulfill in Chutz La'aretz and Chutz La'aretz, but what you definitely do see, and Hindi is right, is that I can't fulfill this entire Sefer Habrit unless I'm living in Eretz Yisrael. That's definitely the focus. That's why the Ramban says that ideally, all of the Torah is meant to be fulfilled in Eretz Yisrael, which means that ideally, and we're going to see this, is it better to daven in Eretz Yisrael than in Chutz La'aretz? Of course. The Rambam will give even a different explanation. You're closer to the Kodesh Kodashim. You're closer to the Beit HaMikdash. You're closer to the stairway to heaven. But again, putting all that aside, the ideal of all the mitzvot is in Eretz Yisrael, but that doesn't mean that you also don't daven in Chutz La'aretz. I don't know about you though, but I definitely feel that my tefillot in Eretz Yisrael and are of a different quality than in Chutz La'aretz. You feel it because you're much farther, so just like your internet connection, it's a little weaker in Chutz La'aretz, but you can still, definitely, you're still required to daven there. Now let's take a look again back to this Rambam and Shmo Perchav Gimel, where we're continuing from. Hi shetzivanu la'avdo. Right? Take a look at this. We are required to worship God. Ukvar nechpal tzivoy ze pa'amayim ba'amro va'avadetem et Hashem Elokechem va'amar oto ta'avodu. So he says, we have, the Torah keeps telling us this, worship God, v'amar ula avdo, and it will also say ula avdo. So we don't just hear it twice, we hear it 3 times. The af alpi shezeh hatzivuy, hu gam kein me'atzivuyim hakolalim. He says, I can't deny it. What does the word ula avdo mean? No matter how you want to look at it. What does ula avdo mean? It means to worship God. Excellent. Kamosha biarnu b'shoresh dalid. He says, V'hinei, yesh bo yichud shehu tzivoy b'tefila. But it has a particular usage, predominantly for tefillah. He says, how do I know that? Because of ula avdo b'chol levavchem, that's clearly tefillah. Again, but avadu can be various explanations, like we saw, avdu b'torato, avdu b'mikdasho. Klomar, Lalachat sham litpalel bo. But even that, avdu b'torato, avdu b'mikdasho, means go to the mikdash to worship God with tefillah. Lalachat sham litpalel. What in the world is the Rambam saying? He's saying that the ikar, as he says, ikar hatefillah is voto ta'avod. Ikar hatefillah is avoda. He says, therefore, even when we see Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem, that's the mitzvah of tefillah. So now let's look carefully and see what is the Rambam teaching us about the nature of tefillah deoraita. Again, look at the context. The context was about social laws. And Sam ben Adam lamakom, Hinei anochi shalech malach lefanecha. I'm going to bring you now to Eretz Yisrael. You have to listen to all of these laws. Ki im shamoa tishma b'kolo v'asita kol asher daber va'ayavti et oivecha v'tzarti et torecha. And my malach is going to bring you in, again, according to most Parshanim, Moshe Rabbeinu, do not worship their gods, right? Do not, velo ta'avdem, don't turn to them at all, don't worship them, destroy them. Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem, uvarechet lachmacha bet meimecha v'asivoti machalam b'kirbecha. According to the Rambam, what is this va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem? You're going to worship Hashem. But it's not just, he says, that's a mitzvah kolalet. You're going to worship Hashem versus worshiping the other gods. How do you worship the other gods? Lo tishtachabel Elohim. Don't bow down to them. Again, don't follow their practices. Destroy them. Instead, worship me. Again, and va'avadtem uveirachet lachmacha bet meimecha. Take a look at this. This is such a chidush. Uvavadatem uveirachet lachmacha. What does it mean? Worship God and he will bless your bread and water. The Rambam says, every time the word vavadatem is used, I learned from ulavdo b'chol lebavchem that what type of avodah am I talking about? Yes, I'm talking about general worship of God also. That's a mitzvah kolelet. But the basis for tefillah is also vavadatem. You're going to daven to Hashem. Everyone see this? It's not that you're going to worship God and then he's going to bless you. It's you're going, meaning it's not that you're going to keep the mitzvot or you're going to bring karbanot, or no, you're going to daven to Hashem and he'll be the source of your blessing. In other words, what is Hashem afraid of? Why would we turn to the gods of Canaan? Because what are we going to think? We're going to think that they're the ones like Baal, Asherah, that they're the ones who are providing us with our lechem and our mayim. Hashem says, no, you want bread and water. What are you going to do? You're going to daven to me. Yes.
I don't know. It's just this whole terminology bothers me.
Yes.
I feel like it's, like a person wants a person to join in on, in his business. So he has to solicit people to come and get them to join in. Like it almost like, it sounds condescending, this kind of like asking people like, I took you out of Mitzrayim. I did all the makot, I did everything. And now that they want to go into Eretz Yisrael and he has to let them know that it's coming from him. It just sounds so...
You're totally right, meaning 100%. This is where Chazal, meaning we look at Am Yisrael and we say, oh my, right? Meaning, by the way, what happens? They come into Eretz Yisrael and do they worship Avodah Zarah?
Yes.
Yeah. And Hindi, I couldn't agree with you more. We're looking back and we're saying, what? Like, really? You experience all these miracles and you're still, think of Chet HaEgel, but even more, when you're in Eretz Yisrael, it is condescending. Hashem really has to tell us not to worship Avodah Zarah? Well, apparently, yes. Because when you're living in a culture which is inundated with a belief system that there are different forces of nature, and you may as well appease those forces of nature, then why not hedge my bets? I'll also, turn to my God, but why not turn to Baal and Asherah also? And Hashem says, because they're not going to provide you with anything. Nothing comes from them. Destroy it all. And va'avadtem. Va'avadtem doesn't just mean worship me. It means pray to me and I will I will provide this for you, but you have to know that it's from me. How do we know that it's from Hashem? We turn to Hashem, right? Same thing with our children. We don't just deposit, I don't know, money into their bank accounts. We ask, right? They come to ask us if they need some financial help, right? We want them to know that it's from us, right? And we want to teach them lessons along the way, right? What is this money for, right? Not to waste the money, recognize that, okay, did you earn it? So, Hinti, I agree, right? This really is, I'm even going to argue, psychologically very difficult, but the truth is that Am Yisrael need to hear this message. But wait a second, what do we see from this? Va'avadtem appears within a context, we said, of social laws. Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem. In other words, you're going to turn to me, yeah?
יש לי שתי שאלות על מה שהינדי אמרה, שתי דברים להגיד. First of all, the first time שכתוב ועבדתם בעניין של עבודה ולחם, זה באדם הראשון בכלל, של קשר בין
כל הכבוד, לעבדה ולשמרה,
ואז העונש, so that shows us, that teaches the kesher between avodah and that.
And what does Rashi say? Beautiful. I'm actually going to take out
the
Rashi.
The second thing I wanted to say about Hindi is look at today, how people don't realize or recognize Hashem in our life. And that דווקא shows, וזה הרב שטיינזלץ כתב לגבי פרשת משפטים בכלל. He says, after Har Sinai and the whole appearance of God, then you get the rules. And the question is why? Why isn't B'niyat Mishkan come right after Har Sinai? Because all of the rules, through the rules of worshiping, through the rules of chevrati things, you see God. In the everyday, in everything you do every day, you see God. It's not
right, but today it's different. But today it's different, Bella. Like today I can understand it because even though I'm here and I feel it, but for many people, like because we don't see Hashem in a lot of the things obvious, but then you're thinking after Matan Torah and they had him really there, it's just harder for me there to see him saying to them, I'm going to help you fight this war, I'm going to help you do that. And,
no, but it's not just teoria. זה בדיוק העניין. That's why you get the חוקים of משפטים, of פרשת משפטים. You have to do this, you have to do that. You have to remember, put the nekudot or the avnei derech on the way, so you see Hashem, also on Shabbat, also on Shabbat Aveda, also, and when you eat, also everything you do, you have to see Hashem. It's not only theoretically. Right, right. So that's an answer maybe for today also. Even today, when you have a problem, you could just say, okay, I have a problem, what's the solution? Or say, okay, I have a problem, רגע, מה שאני רוצה ממני, מה אני לומדת מזה, ואז a solution.
יפה, יפה, יפה מאוד. And 100%. Now, by the way, Bella, with regard to what you said, again, about Adam Harishon, Lo'ovda L'Shamra, just to, I'm going to see if I can, you know what, I'm just going to read it. So sure enough, in Perek Bet, when we have the presentation of man and Gan Eden and this terminology, Ele todot hashamayim ba'aretz bibaram, v'yom asot Hashem Elokim eretz v'shamayim, v'chol siach hasadeh terem yir ba'aretz, v'chol esav hasadeh terem yitzmach, ki lo himtir Hashem Elokim al haaretz, v'adam ayin la'avod et ha'adama. Right, there isn't yet full vegetation because man isn't there to work the ground. But Rashi's bothered because what's the next thing Hashem is going to say? What's your work? Your work is basically to eat the fruit. So Rashi says, what does it mean? Adam ayin lavodet adama ve'ein makir b'tovatan shel gshamim. Ukshaba Adam v'yada shehem tzorech la'olam hitpalel aleihem v'yardu v'tzamchu ha'ilanot v'hatshaim. He says exactly that, and perhaps based on this pasuk in Mishpatim, right? Rashi says ulavdo is lehitpalel, that we have to wait for Adam because Adam ultimately is going to be the one who is going to come, and he's going to, and let me just reshare this, that he's going to be the one to daven. So again, and why man being the one to daven? Clearly because man is the connection between Shamayim and Aretz. He's the maintenance man. So we see this here as well. And the whole nature then of Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem is you're going to be in the land. And by the way, Hindi, this seems to support what you're saying. Maybe we should really only have to be loud once we're in Eretz Yisrael. Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem, right? But now we know that all the mitzvot actually are going to be appropriate, as the Ramban says, even for trial run, right? Even for practice before we get to Eretz Yisrael, but we still have this nature of tefillah. Now let's look carefully. The Rambam also said it's a mitzvah kolelet. You have to do everything Hashem says, but the best way to worship this is ulavdo b'chol lebavchem, again, izui avodah shabalev, with tefillah. So what does this mean? This entire parsha refers to everything that Hashem said. If you im shamo tishma b'kolo. In other words, part of the nature of tefillah is, want to see this, is to worship Hashem, meaning to see ourselves. Tefillah, this is the point of the shiur today. Tefillah is about arousing us, reminding us what our values of avodah are.
Shani, if we
in other words, avodah here, yeah.
If we look at Yetziat Mitzrayim, when Moshe comes, he says to Am Yisrael, Shlachet ami v'yavduni. That means that even in the Midbar, or even on their way to Eretz Yisrael, they still had to daven. So we see that it's not just a mitzvah shekluya ba'aretz. Because it had to start even before they got to the Aretz.
100%. Me'ule kelna refanala. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu, Ma'amad Har Sinai. Sorry, Chet HaEgel. You're 100% right. That's next week's parsha. Again, so excited to continue this journey with you. So from Parshat Mishpatim, from this week's parsha, what do we see? An unbelievable idea that the Rambam is telling us. Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem means worship God in general with everything, but also with tefillah. In other words, tefillah is part of, believe it or not, a social nature. It's part of a social context. In other words, Kim Shemot Tishma B'Kolo and Va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem. Worship God also ben Adam l'chaveiro. In other words, tefillah has a social component. What in the world does that mean? Basically, Hashem says, if you treat one another properly, you treat one another's property properly. You rest on Shabbat so that everyone else can rest. That's part of ulavdo b'chol lebavchem. That's part of your worshiping of God. You're going to bring your entire social dynamic again as you worship Hashem. That's why va'avadtem et Hashem Elokechem isn't just don't worship avodah zarah, worship Hashem. It's worship Hashem the way that I just told you. Ben Adam l'chaveiro is a means of worshiping Hashem, which already tells us what is our tefillah. Our tefillah is not just about us. Our tefillah, that's why now we understand it's rifa'inu, it's slachlanu, it's shmakolenu, and it's about, part of tefillah is seeing ourselves as part of a whole, as part of an entire social infrastructure, which is why not only is tefillah ideally b'tzibur, but tefillah, we're going to see, really does bring us into, again, an entire social dynamic with the rest of Am Yisrael. So we're going to continue to speak about this because it's not such a clear concept. According to the Rambam, what do you mean? Just like you return lost objects, you're going to worship God through tefillah. In other words, your tefillah is also about, remember we kept talking about recalibrating our values? It's about recalibrating not just our relationship in Adam le'makom that we've been speaking about until now. It's about recalibrating our relationship in Adam le'chaveiro. And this is a Parshat Mishpatim concept. And this Be'ezrat Hashem, just like Becky said, we're going to have to continue with this Be'ezrat Hashem next week. Yes, Cindy.
Also, but also that when we do things more like as a unity and we do other people and we do ben Adam l'chaveiro and it's just not about ourselves, like we're always being taught, like if we live like a narcissist type of like a living, it's only about ourselves, we only think about ourselves, and it's also avodah zarah. So trying to do things work. So this is also like it's avodah zarah for yourself. So if you do think that as thinking of the next person, you're tapping into it not only being about you, and then you can recognize that Hashem is there because it's not only about you.
That is beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I think that that's really exactly what the Rambam is teaching us from Parshat Mishpatim. It's not just about you. Beautiful, beautiful. And I keep thinking, Nachon, if we can bring this notion of tefillah into schools today, I think that could help kids relate a little more.
להוסיף I forgot what I was going to say. להוסיף, בדיבור, when you talk about Hashem in your life, יש לו יותר מקום. When you do it socially, when you say, oh, I had such a miracle today, I was running to somewhere and I just had a trip, Hashem shalach li, so you put Hashem into your life, ואז את מייצרת שיח של הקדוש ברוך הוא בכלל, ואז הוא נוכח בחיים שלך. וזה בכלל שיח ציבורי, זה חברתי לגמרי. זה לייצר את המקום הזה.
איזה יופי, איזה יופי, בהחלט. וואו, וואו, וואו. כל הכבוד, באמת, כל הכבוד. To all of you. I am looking forward already to next week when we see, as Becky mentioned, how we're going to take this now to see the first official tefillah b'tzibur in Tanakh. שבוע טוב ומבורך. תודה, תודה רבה.
שבוע טוב.
שבוע טוב. Sorry for the abridged shiur just this week. Next week, regular time. Bezrat Hashem.
Bezrat Hashem. Bli neder.
Continue